Welcome to the Highly Sensitive Alpha Male podcast. I'm your host, Jared Terrell. Let's get into it. Let's do it. Today I want to talk about vulnerability and talking to strangers. Those are the two topics I wanted to speak about. So, first of all, vulnerability is a strength. I think we can all agree on that. Anyone who, not to sound condescending, but anyone who has a brain in their head, anyone who's intelligent, vulnerability is a strength, and it's still seen as a weakness, which is really upsetting to me and disconcerting. And I was on set yesterday just doing some background work, and I met this 25-year-old guy, nice guy, and he said he couldn't imagine having any vulnerable conversations with his friends. Like, they would just be ruthless with him. They would just bust his balls, and he wouldn't hear the end of it. I can't remember if he said they'd beat the shit out of him, but like they would just be ruthless. And that's just so sad to me. Like, at this day and age, you would think 25 years old, is that Gen Z now, or is that millennial? It's one of the new generations. You would think they'd be more in touch with their feelings, but I guess depending on where you grow up, that is not the case. And it just made me so sad because I couldn't imagine having even one friend that I can't be vulnerable with. I'm not saying I want every conversation to be serious. I want every conversation to be heavy. And we're talking about deep shit. Sometimes you just want to talk about the weather or cars or, things you like or what you're eating, your workout. But I want to be able to have vulnerable conversations. I want to be able to have deep and meaningful conversations. And that just happens with me. That's just who I am. I guess that's part of being a highly sensitive person, is you tend to bypass the superficial, to skip over that. I just have no time for it. I have no patience for that crap. I just can't. I can't do it. I don't attract those kind of people, which is cool. But I've really come to the terms of the fact that vulnerability is a strength, and it's my strength, and it's my superpower, and I need to embrace that. And I've had people say that to me before, that my sensitivity is a superpower, and that my vulnerability is a superpower in my acting. But now I'm recognizing it as one in my life as well. But it sucks because we think we've come so far with mental health and self-actualization, whatever the hell that means to you, and emotionality and being open and vulnerability and sharing, but we really haven't come that far. There's just still a long way to go. And I think vulnerability, at this day and age, 2024, vulnerability is still seen as a weakness by most people. And that's just really sad. And it's not the case. I think people are afraid to be vulnerable, and that's across the board. Women, men, doesn't matter. Like, I don't meet a lot of women that are vulnerable with me, like, right off the bat. And I guess most people are not vulnerable right off the bat, and you can't expect that, because we are assessing and we're protecting ourselves, and we don't know if you're a safe person to be vulnerable with. But I think of my female friends, and like, I don't remember them being overly vulnerable. I think I have more vulnerable, deep emotional conversations with my male friends, to be honest. So it's just a problem. And there's also the flip side of it, where it's kind of being used as, I don't know, like it's like trendy now to be vulnerable. Like, vulnerability is strength, and it is strength. But there's like this kind of douchey thing going around social media and the internet, and it almost seems like it's being used as some sort of like a marketing tool for coaches and businesses, and it just seems disingenuous and fake, and being used to make oneself or a business look good, that whole thing of virtue signaling, versus actually giving a shit, actually caring. And that's frustrating. But I think it's really powerful to open yourself up and talk to people and share what's going on with you, the good, the bad, and the ugly, all of it. I'm not saying go around dumping your problems on people. No one needs that. That sucks. That's a bummer. But we always ask, hey, how's it going? And people are generally not honest in how they're doing. They won't say, oh, to be honest, I'm struggling today. And honestly, I would find that refreshing if someone did that. Occasionally, I will do that. It depends. I don't want to fucking open up to a stranger at Shoppers Drug Mart. I don't want to open up to my grocer. But if there's someone that I feel like, yeah, you know what, I'm going to be honest with this person right now. There's power in that. And that ties into talking to strangers. I think for me, talking to strangers is one of my favorite things to do. It's one of the most healing and cathartic and powerful things I find out there. Even if you're just talking about something as superficial and simple as the weather, engaging with a stranger is a beautiful thing because you are opening yourself up and you are connecting with another human being. And that's what we're meant to do as human beings, is we are a social creature. And the lovely thing about connecting with a stranger is there's no baggage there. There's no history. There's no expectations. There's nothing, right? You don't know this person. So you can be freer. I find talking to strangers an antidepressant in and of itself. It's really remarkable. And, I went back home to Vancouver, and I was on Vancouver Island for a number of days recently. And I had the most profound, deeply changing, truly life-changing conversations with complete strangers in this little town just outside Victoria that my grandparents kind of used to live. And I love that place so much. It's so quaint, and there's a real community vibe there, But I remember I was really, really struggling. Like just in a dark place, daily dark thoughts, panic all day long. Like my mental health this is only a few weeks ago. I'm a lot better now, thank God. But, I got myself out of it. But it was really horrible for months, and it was just progressing worse and worse and worse. And it was getting kind of scary, to be honest. I just didn't know what the fuck to do. And so it was a nice sunny day, and I had gone for a run, and then I saw this old ferry dock, and it looked like it had kind of been abandoned, and I was wondering, like, what's the deal with this? Because it doesn't look that old, but it looks like it's no longer in use. And I saw this guy, and he was clearly journaling. Because I can tell when someone's journaling because they're just in it, man. They're in it. Like, they're feeling their feelings. There's an intensity about them. Like, they're struggling or they're working shit out. And I passed him, and then, he looked like really interesting, like some kind of cool jewelry and like a toque on and sunglasses, and like looked a little bit like edgy. And I'm like, I don't know. Do I want to talk to this guy? I was a little bit afraid, I guess. But I was like, fuck it, I'm going to talk to him. So I passed him again. I was like, I picked something random to talk about, or something topical. So I was like, hey, is that ferry dock still in use, or is it abandoned? And he told me the story. I'm like, cool. And I was like, are you journaling there? He's like, oh, yeah, no, I journal every day, and I go over it, and I highlight the parts that I think are important. He was just telling me his whole process, and he just opened up to me, and that's always happened. That's always happened to me. People have always opened up to me since I was like a teenager, and it's very cool. I like it. It's a privilege. It feels like an honor, really, that someone will trust me with their deep, kind of dark secrets and pain and heaviness. Anyways, he was talking about the tools that he has and how, I can't remember how we got into it. He mentioned a breathing technique, and I was like, oh, is that Wim Hof? Like, yeah, that's it. That's what it's called. I'm like, Cool. Does it help? He's like, yeah. Is it good for anxiety and depression? It's like, yeah, it's good for both. Because at this point, we'd been talking for about 15 minutes and he had shared some personal stuff. And I just took a chance. I'm like, I'm going to talk about my stuff now because he shared some and I'm struggling. And the guy's probably about 20 years older than me, late 50s. So maybe he has some wisdom. Or maybe I can just connect it. I didn't really think about it all that much. I just took a chance. I'm like, I'm going to share. And I'm like, cool. Because I struggle with both those things. He's like, I do too. I'm on medication for both. I'm on medication for anxiety and medication for depression. Like, wow, man. Thank you for sharing that with me. He's like, yeah, it's hard. And he shared about how he's tried to commit suicide 5 to 10 times in his life. Just like crazy to me. And but he's still here. He's still going. He's still kicking. And he's like, I'm going through a separation right now, and I love my wife very much, and she doesn't want to be with me, and it's very hard for me because I want her back in my life, and I don't really know what to do, but I'm giving her space. She doesn't want me to know where she lives, and she doesn't really. I don't know if she even wants me to have her phone number, and so I'm just giving her the space she needs to process and figure it out. But the first 7 months of this year were really, really dark for me, like really dark, and so the last couple months have been good, and I got myself out of it, and I used my tools, and he was saying that even a couple weeks ago I had the thought like I don't know if I can do this anymore. I don't know if I can keep going, but I shook it off and I dusted myself off, picked myself back up, and kept going, and you can keep going. You have inner strength. We have to remember we have this inner strength, and I don't know you, but you're strong enough. I don't know you, but you can make it. You can do it. You're strong enough to do it. Something along those lines. And it was so beautiful. And like I had this conversation with a stranger. You understand? A complete stranger. What a wonderful thing. And I broke down in front of him and cried, and it was just he shared so much with me, and he was so supportive and believed in me as a stranger, just for him to say like, I don't know you, but I know you can make it. I know you're gonna make it. I know you're gonna be okay. You're gonna get through this. You're strong enough. And he's like, I'll be here tomorrow if you want to hang out again. So the next day I went, and I just barely caught him at the end of the day, but it was cool. And then we shared some more. And that's the kind of thing that can happen when you talk to a stranger and you just reach out. And, a couple days later, it was my last day in town. And serendipitously, I decided to stay in town, stay on the island. I was going to go back to the mainland. I was flying out on Monday afternoon. So Sunday, I was going to go back to the mainland in Vancouver, hang out with my buddy all day long, crash at his place, and then leave because I hadn't seen him in many months, and I love him, and I love him. Okay, he's my friend. I can be vulnerable and say that as a man. But despite that wonderful conversation with that man, I was just in a rough place, and I was thoroughly overwhelmed and afraid and stressed out about an imminent move and if I made the right decision. And so I'm just like, I can't handle all this shit right now. I can't handle taking a ferry, then taking the SkyTrain and taking a bus and like unpacking. I'm just going to stay an extra night here and just make it easier on myself. And thank God I did, because that last day I met these two wonderful women, like older than me, but one was probably again like mid to late 50s, and then the other one was probably late 70s, maybe early 80s. And all I did was ask about her dogs. She had a couple of little dogs. I wasn't even going to stay in this. It was outside a cafe. I went inside the cafe to see the vibe. I didn't dig it at all. I'm like, no, I don't like it here. There's too many old people. They're either complaining about shit. How old people like to complain. I'm like, not for me. So I came back out, and then she was still there. And I'm like, you know what? I love petting dogs. They're one of the only things that makes me feel good when I'm in a really dark, I'm struggling. I'm in a really, dark place. Dogs are awesome. They just make you feel better. So I'm like, I'm going to try to pet these dogs. So I talked to this lady, and I don't even remember how we got to talking about what. I don't know if I was getting teary-eyed again because I was crying a lot during that period. Like every day. It was bad. And there's nothing wrong with crying, but it was just like I was in such a I don't want to say unstable, but like I was in such a place of pain. It felt like I had multiple people's pain inside of me. And it was just so raw and so on the surface and present that I was just crying at the drop of a hat. It was really hard. It's great to cry. It feels good to cry, but it's just when you're crying all the time, it's not good. I don't want to put a judgment on it that it's not good, but it's sometimes you need to do it. But it's like a relative hadn't just died. I didn't just get out of a bad breakup. You know what I mean? Like I was just crying every day for no reason, just because I was in pain and depressed and anxious and shit. Anyways, I got to talking about these. I talked to these ladies for about an hour and a half. I could have talked to them for another hour and a half, and we just talked about the most deep shit. About like, all three of us were intuitive and sensitive, and they said stuff to me that I'm like, how do you know that? How could you possibly know that about me? They just saw me and they heard me. And the older lady, Marge, so lovely. She's like, you should work with children. I don't know. I'm seeing you volunteering or working with children because the thing with kids is they're not heard a lot of the time. Whether they're teenagers or young kids, they're not heard. And that's where a lot of the trauma and a lot of the pain comes from, is like these kids, they're just not heard. And that's what you got today from both of us, is you were heard. We heard you and we saw you. And Darlene, the younger one, she was like, you're beautiful and you're strong and you're intuitive and you have everything that you need inside of you to make it and to heal. It was such a beautiful thing. And that was with strangers. With strangers. So, I guess what I want to get across is vulnerability is strength. It is power. And confidence, I think, too. When someone shares with me indiscriminately and they're just like, I'm doing this, I'm like, look at the balls on you. I got so much respect for you right now. When you just shared that shit with me, that's heavy. Wow. I think vulnerability is confidence. And I just so respect it. And I urge you to try to be more vulnerable. Start with the people in your life. But if that's not a fertile ground, like this 25-year-old kid I was talking to, who just like, he could never with his friends. Tragic. But if you can't do it with the people in your life, then do it with strangers. Start with strangers. Just see what happens. Experiment. What do you have to lose? Who cares? Like no one, we're all caught up and wrapped up in our own bullshit. So you sharing and opening up about yours it's going to make someone else feel better about themselves, probably. Or they're just going to be there for you. They're going to like try to just give you tips or just listen or be a compassionate human being. Or the off chance they could be shitty. Rare, probably not going to happen. Or they might just not get it. They'd be like, oh yeah, no, that sucks. And then move on. And then maybe you might feel a little silly because you're like, oh shit, that person, they didn't get it. Or maybe I made them uncomfortable. But who cares, really? Who cares? I just, it's hard in big cities too. Like in Toronto, people are not as friendly. I mean, definitely more engaging here than in fucking Vancouver. Sorry, no offense. I'm trashing Vancouver again, but I hate it there. People are so just closed off and cold and not friendly and receptive at all. It's like they're friendly in like a superficial, polite way, not a real, authentic way. It's like no one wants to engage. It's weird. So it's harder to talk to strangers in the big city than it is in, say, smaller towns. But it can still be done. I do it all the time. I do it every day. And I'm just going to keep on doing it because it feels so good. And you make connections. You make friends. You know, like I have the two ladies I talked to. I have both their numbers. I've had phone calls with both of them since I've gone back. I've only been back for 2 weeks. I had a phone call with Marge the day I was leaving. Like the very next day, I was on the ferry ride. We talked for like 40 minutes. Talked to Darlene for like an hour and a half the other day. Like, it's beautiful. And I'm so grateful for having met them and just connecting with people that saw me, even though they didn't know me at all. They just saw who I was. They saw my inner beauty and my inner strength when I couldn't. And they just showed it to me and just were like, it was like a gift they gave me. They were like, here, this is you. You're amazing. You can do it. And I needed that more than anything. And, tips and things that they kind of encouraged me to do, I still do every day now since then, because it helps. It makes you feel stronger, more connected. And so I really encourage you, if you can, we got to push ourselves to get out of our comfort zones. That's kind of, unfortunately, the way we grow. That's just the way it is. You gotta, as they say, get uncomfortable. But I like to say, just push yourself, stretch yourself, try to get out of your bubble, out of your comfort zone. Because this whole get uncomfortable thing is really, it's a little too heavy for me. It's too rough. It's too jagged. It's too forceful. Why don't we try easing into it? All right, that's it. Thanks for listening, everybody. And yeah, if you're being vulnerable, thank you. Just on behalf of humans, and because we need more of that. This world we're in a rough spot right now, and there's a lot of pain. There's a lot of divisiveness and a lot of people suffering. And it's really horrible what's going on in the world right now, and even just at home, it's people are struggling here. It's life is expensive, and so the more vulnerability, the more compassion we can put out into the world, even just our daily lives, I think the more it'll spread and snowball. And I've seen it in me just complimenting someone. They're all of a sudden in a good mood, and then that carries on to another stranger. I've seen it. It's incredible. It's a beautiful thing. And so I think those are just little things you can do every day that cost you nothing and are so easy to do and make you feel good too, while also making other people feel good. We need to connect more with each other. We're getting more and more isolated. It's not good. It's bad news. Contributing to all this fucking mental health epidemic that's going on. So connect, be vulnerable. Yeah, that's it. All right. Peace out, guys. Thanks for listening.